Hey, fifth grade friends, it's Mrs. Van. We are back to read another chapter in our book Guest by Mary Downing Hahn. Rudy was on the bed behind me, but he jumped off just before I started filming. So he's around somewhere, and hopefully he will make an appearance before we finish reading this chapter. We are on chapter 10 of the book Guest by Mary Downing Hahn. So let's get on with it. I opened my eyes to find myself lying on the mossy ground at the foot of the tallest stone in the circle. It towered over me like a robed figure from a dimly remembered story, dark and foreboding. Guest squatted beside me, stroking my face with his cold hands. "Molly, wake up, he begged. Aiden stared down at us. "On your feet," he said. "This is no place to linger." Without any help from Aiden, I struggled to stand. My legs ached with fatigue, and I was weak and dizzy. The kind folk had gone and taken Thomas with them, leaving no trace of themselves behind. Clinging to Guest's hand to steady myself, I followed Aiden slowly from down the hill, trying not to slip on that damp, mossy stone. How long had I laid unconscious? Was it dusk or dawn? It was impossible to tell. The gray light and misty rain cast a perpetual twilight in the woods. Once we were on the path, Aiden found shelter in a shallow cave and set about making a fire. Guest and I huddled together and watched the flames sputter on the wet wood. "What should I do now?" I asked. Aiden didn't bother to look at me. Frowning into the fire, he said, "You heard what she said. Go home. Your brother's not of a mind to leave the kind folk. The longer we stay here, the more the danger." Aiden laid 2 potatoes on the fire. "You need to roast another," I said. "There's 3 of us." "I count 2. Me and you. You've left out Guest." "Why should I cook for him?" Taking a 3rd potato from the sack, I laid it beside the other 2. I half expected Aiden to remove Guest's potato, but he left it where I'd put it. After we'd eaten our potatoes and what was left of the apples, cheese, and bread, I heard a noise in the dark beyond the firelight. Alarmed, I looked at Aiden, but he was already on his feet. "Where have you been?" he shouted. "The kind folk nearly killed us all." My dog stepped out of the woods. "I didn't know how close you were to the stones. It's glad I am to see all of you unharmed." With a smile at Guest and me, he turned to Aiden, and the 2 spoke together in low voices. My dog shook his head, frowned, and then sat down beside me. "Aiden tells me you were less than courteous to her royal kindness. Her royal kindness. Why must you speak your mind without giving a thought to what you say? If the queen hated you before she met you, she hates you more even now." Aiden glanced at me. "I doubt anyone has ever spoken to the queen as that saucepot did. Someone should stuff a rag in her mouth. She's made things worse for us all." "What did you do to help?" I said. "Nothing at all. You stood there and watched even after she hit you. You don't care what happens to Thomas or me or anyone else." "And why should I care? Your brother can stay or go. It's all the same to me. And the toad—" "Enough, Aiden," my dog said. "It shames me to hear you speak so." Aiden poked at the fire, his face lit by the flames. He said nothing, but anger steamed from him. Guest sat down next to my dog. "I miss you. I happy you back." My dog grinned and looked him up and down. "You've grown," he said, and leaned closer to speak softly to Guest in the language they shared. I sat alone and stared at the glowing odds and ends of the fire. I was tired. So tired of living like a traveler with no bed of my own and no roof over my head. Always hungry, always cold, always wet from rain and fog. This was a dreadful place, and I was sick to death of it. My dog leaned toward me. "Such a sad little face you have. Surely you've not given up hope." I fidgeted with the locket, turning it this way and that, watching it catch the light of the fire. "Thomas wants to stay with the kind folk, where he's a prince." I sniffled and rubbed my eyes, determined not to cry. But a tear escaped and another one followed, and soon they were running down my cheeks and my chest was heaving with sobs. "Perhaps Aiden is right," my dog said. "Since Thomas wants to stay, perhaps you should let him. If we sneak away tonight, we might escape the wrath of the kind ones." "You know I can't do that. I must bring Thomas home to Mam and Daddo." Aiden spoke up from the other side of the fire. "The half-wit will be the death of us all." I jumped to my feet. "If you hate me and Guest so much, why don't you leave? We don't need you now that my dog is here." I say you and me both should be on our way, Aiden said to my dog. You have business to attend to, and there's a certain lass waiting for me. My dog looked long and hard at Aiden. My business will wait, he said, and so will your lass. Aiden lay down with his back to the fire. Guest was asleep under his blanket. My dog and I were the only ones awake. Why does Thomas want to stay here? I asked him. Why doesn't he remember me? Has the queen cast a spell on him? My dog gazed into the dark forest where no light shone, not even moonlight. Thomas has lived in our kingdom so long he remembers no place else. Spell or no spell, he believes he's one of the kind folk now. He was a baby when they took him. Why does he look older than he is? Surely you've heard tales of mortals who join the kind folk for a night of dancing and wake to find themselves old men in a changed world. Yes, of course I'd heard those stories, but I'd never known such a thing to happen in real life. I looked down at myself. Was my dress a little tighter now? Certainly my hair was longer. Am I older than I was when I left home? My dog shook his head. You must bide with those ones in their dwellings to feel time as they do. I sat back, relieved. For how was I to know? I'd no mirror to look in, and just as well, I thought, for I was dirty and ragged, and my hair was a tangled mess. I wouldn't care to see my reflection. But Guest, he's bigger than he was when we started, I said. He grows at his own pace, faster than you, it seems. He smiled. And glad you should be, for how could you have carried him all this way? My dog turned his attention to Aiden. Get up and make yourself useful, he said. Fetch all the wood you can carry. You know as well as I the value of fire on a dark night in a dark land. Long after Aiden had vanished among the trees, I heard him crashing through the bushes, a sure sign he was still angry. Why do we need wood? I asked my dog. We always let the fire go out at night. Did I not say you're in danger here? My dog asked. We must build a ring of fire around us. None of their kind dare to cross over flames. I shivered. It's me they want, isn't it? Mostly, my dog said, but they don't care for Aiden or me either. They detest Guest, but they can't harm him because he shares their blood. They simply leave his sort to die alone in the forest, or they trade them for fine babies like Thomas. Guest sighed in his sleep and snuggled closer to me. Half kind folk, I thought. And half what else? Mad Dog touched Guest's head lightly. I'll keep him safe, and you too, I promise. I looked at the changeling's sleeping face. It shamed me to think how much I'd once hated him. In those days, I was no better than Aiden. Homely he is, my dog said, but he's a spunky one, do you not agree? Oh, yes, indeed. He helped me chase away the tinies and escape from Granny Hedgepath. Did he now? He did, but I saved my own self from false Thomas, the crying baby who changed into a wolf and tried to kill me. And how did you escape from the wolf? I pulled the locket from my dress and waved it in my dog's face. He scooted backwards so fast he almost fell into the fire. His face dark with anger, he said, Never do that again, Molly. Do you hear? Never. Oh, please don't be angry. I'm sorry, I forgot. Try to remember the next time you reach for that locket. Use it on them, not me. What are you, my dog, that you fear the touch of iron? You can't be one of them, but you and Aiden are not like me. I told you, I'm a traveler. But what are travelers? I don't know what he would have said if Aiden hadn't come back with a huge armload of wood. He dumped it on the ground by the fire, which had almost burned itself out. I hope that's all you need, for it's not to my liking to stumble around the Darklands, hearing voices and strange sounds and almost losing my way. My dog and Aiden laid the wood in a circle around our sleeping place. A good fire will protect us from whatever the kind folks send our way, my dog said. When the fire burned strong and warm, my dog told Aiden to stay and tend it. I'll collect more wood. What about her? Who's to blame for our plight? Aiden asked with another scowl at me. Does she not collect wood too? It's Molly's place to watch Guest. My dog plunged into the shadows beyond the fire. He went as quiet as a deer and left no noise behind him. Aiden sat at a distance from Guest and me. How do you bear to be so close to that toad? Does not his stink fill your nose? Why do you dislike Guest so much? I asked. Aiden spat into the fire. Everyone despises his kind, except you, and you are clearly a simpleton. Mad Dog likes him. Aiden spat again, harder this time, and the gob sizzled in the ashes. He's a bigger fool than you are. Tell me something, Aiden. I wanted an answer, so I tried to speak like a grown woman, not a child to be lied to. What are you in Medog? Who are your people, and where do you come from? Aiden poked a log back into the fire. We're travelers from over the hills and far away. You're more than that. Ask Medog. Aiden rolled up in his blanket and turned his back on Guest and me. Left to my own thoughts, I watched the fire. Smoke blew in my face and made my throat choky, but Guest slept on. Every now and then his eyelashes quivered as if he were dreaming. He grimaced, he moaned, he twitched, but he screwed his eyes tight shut and didn't wake. What is your other half? I whispered. A goblin? A troll? I studied his face. Surely he was none of these. Yet his father must have been a homely specimen, for Guest had not one speck of the kind folk's beauty. When my dog returned, he carried enough wood to last several days. I watched him build up the fire, and when he seemed satisfied with its size, he glanced at Aiden. Sound asleep, he muttered. I'm awake, I said. My dog smiled and came to sit beside me. What keeps your eyes open? I'm wondering when they'll come and what they'll be and what they'll do. My dog sniffed the wind. We'll soon find out, he said. They're already on their way. I opened my mouth to ask my question again, but he raised his finger to his lips. Something's coming. See the deer? As he spoke, a herd of deer burst out of the woods and ran past us. Maybe 10, maybe more, their eyes wild in the firelight. I turned and watched their white tails vanish into the dark behind us. 2 or 3 owls followed on silent wings. Then came badgers, foxes, and a bevy of small creatures, all as frightened as the deer. Animals know when danger's near, my dog said. Storms, earthquakes, fires, kind folk on the move. I huddled beside him and waited, my breath shallow with fear. At first, I heard nothing, but gradually I became aware of rustling leaves and twigs snapping, heavy breathing, murmurs and whispers, a thickening of the darkness outside the ring of fire. Gradually a shape emerged from the darkness. A man, I thought, neither tall nor short, fat nor thin. Behind him were shadows that moved as trees would move if they were not rooted to the earth. Although I couldn't make out the man's face, his appearance was familiar, but it wasn't until he spoke that I knew him. Molly, he called, at last I found you. Come, let me take you home. I rose to my feet. My legs trembled. Daddo, how did you find me? Oh, my poor dear child. You must be weary and cold and hungry. He stretched out his hand. Come with me. Ma'am weeps for you and rues every unkind word she spoke. My dog pulled me gently back from the fire's edge. No, Molly, it's a trick, like Granny Hedgepath and the wolf. My whole self yearned to leap the fire and run to Daddo. I'd missed him for so long, and there he stood, almost close enough to touch. My dog, you must believe me. It's no trick. I know my own father when I see him. I struggled to free my hand from his, but he was much stronger than I was. Molly, stay with me, he whispered. Don't cross over the fire. Another figure joined Daddo. Ma'am, I cried. Ma'am. I struggled with all my might to free myself from a dog. That's my mother, I was crying now, fighting my dog with all my strength. Ma'am, ma'am. Molly, she called. The kind folk have given Thomas to us. We can go home now, all 4 of us, a family again. My dog held me so tightly my wrists felt numb. You must see things for what they are. It's not your father or your mother, but 2 kind ones, glamorized to look like them. Do you think I don't know my own parents? My shouts woke Guest. He jumped up and grabbed my waist. No, Molly, don't go. Trick, trick. From beyond the flames, Ma'am cried, Please, Molly, we're here to take you and Thomas home. Do you not want to come with us? Don't believe that traveler. He's a liar and a trickster, Daddo said. Be strong, daughter. Break away from him. Run to us. My father was right. My dog was a liar and a trickster. My true parents had come for me. They had Thomas. I was going home. No one, not even my dog, could stop me. In anger, I yanked the locket from around my neck and thrust it into Madog's face. With a cry of pain, he sprang back. I jumped the fire and ran toward my parents. Behind me, my dog yelled, The locket! Hold fast to the locket and save yourself. Ma'am and Daddo waited with smiling faces and outstretched arms. Dearest Molly, they crooned, sweetest daughter, you'll be safe with us. When I was almost close enough to touch Ma'am and Daddo, I saw the shadows in the forest move and shift. I heard rustlings and whispers and the clink of metal. And in front of me, Mam and Dado slowly changed into a pair of kind folk. Horrified by my stupidity, I turned to run back to Madog and the fire, but dozens of kind folk sprang out of the forest and formed a circle around me. They were beautiful, each and every one of them, man and woman both, but their eyes were cruel and their smiles wicked. Terrified, I held up the locket, but they were too far away to touch, and I was too frightened to move closer to them. Stay away, I said. I have iron. Laughing, they joined hands and began to dance slowly around me. Moving in a strange rhythm of fast and slow steps, they chanted, Cast away the locket. Let the locket go. Come, Molly, come. Cast away the locket. Let the locket go. As the kind folk chanted, they danced faster until they became an endless spinning blur shining in the dark. Each flowed into the other as if they were one and not many. My ears filled with their voices. I forgot my fear. I forgot the Queen's angry face. I forgot Thomas, and I forgot Mam and Dado and all that I'd ever known. Slowly, my fingers lost their strength. My grip on the locket loosened. I grew dizzy, lightheaded, tired. The circle shrank, and the dancers came closer, closer, and closer. Their cloaks brushed against me like spider webs. Let the locket go, they crooned. Let the locket go. From far away, I heard Guest's voice on the wind, rising and falling. Molly, Molly. Coming to my senses, I caught the locket just as it began to fall from my hand. The dancers were close now, brushing against me, lost in their dance. Lifting the locket high, I thrust it against their shoulders, their faces, their arms, their hands. The dancers screamed in pain. They broke the circle. They sprang apart, and safe from the locket at the forest's edge, they took a stand and cried out to me. Foolish mortal, you'll never see Tyrenac again. He's ours now. We'll burn your barn and your house. We'll kill your crops. We'll send plagues to your village. Still shouting threats, the kind folk faded away into the darkness. But their threats hung in the air as if written in flames. I leaped over the fire and fell to the ground, weeping tears of anger and pain. Guest knelt beside me and stroked my hair. Oh, Molly, my dog said, when will you learn? I forced myself to look at him. He was indeed angry, and I lowered my head in shame. The way they looked, the words they spoke, how was I to know what they really were? Have you already forgotten Granny and the baby you thought was Thomas? Aiden looked across the fire at me. Like most mortals, she sees what she wants to see. I clutched my dog's arm. They cannot do what they said. Of course they can, my dog said. And much more if they have a mind to. You have enraged them, Molly. They will seek revenge against you and your people. I heard Aiden snort scornfully. But my dog... Lie down. He spoke in a harsh voice I'd never heard him use. Go to sleep. I've had enough of you for tonight. Sleep here, Molly. Guest patted the ground beside him. I lay next to him and took his hand. You saved me, I whispered. If you hadn't called my name, I'd have dropped the locket, and they would have captured me. Guest smiled. I shout loud. A big shout. The shoutiest shout I ever made. Thank you. You're a good friend, Guest. Maybe my only friend tonight. Mad Dog is mad now, but soon he won't be mad. Guest yawned and curled up close to me. He drifted off to sleep, but I lay awake until almost dawn, afraid to close my eyes, lest the flames die and the kind folk return. I don't know about you guys, but this book is getting good, and I'm liking it. So that is the end of Chapter 10. Keep looking for the next time when I join you with Chapter 11. I hope you guys are enjoying this book as much as I am. Take care, friends. Bye-bye.